Limitless wealth, absolute power. Today, we're stepping into a world where money literally has no meaning. This is the life of Sultan Hassanal Bolkiah of Brunei. Not a billionaire, but potentially the world's only trillionaire. Owning 7,000 luxury cars worth $5 billion, the largest residential palace on Earth, and a Boeing 747 with solid gold fixtures. That's just Tuesday for the Sultan of Brunei. But there's a dark side to this kingdom of gold, where extreme opulence meets brutal control, where private jets fly alongside ancient laws, and where one family controls everything, while 500,000 citizens live under their rule. By the end of this video, you'll understand how one man built a kingdom so extravagant it defies reality, and why his wealth might be far greater than anyone has reported. If you're fascinated by the hidden lives of the ultra-wealthy, make sure to subscribe to Billionaire exclusives and hit that notification bell for more exclusive content on the world's richest people. Brunei's history and the Sultan's rise. Nestled on the northern coast of Borneo in Southeast Asia sits Brunei, a tiny nation you could drive across in just 2 hours. With barely 500,000 citizens, this country is smaller than many American cities. But don't let its size fool you. Brunei has evolved into one of the wealthiest nations on Earth, with a GDP per capita that rivals developed Western countries. The Bolkiah family has ruled this land for over 600 years, twice as long as the United States has existed. Their dynasty predates Columbus's voyage to America, continuing an unbroken chain of succession that few royal families can match. But for most of their reign, the Bolkiahs were rulers of a modest kingdom, not the ultra-wealthy monarchs we see today. Everything changed in the early 20th century with one critical discovery: oil. Massive deposits of petroleum and natural gas were found beneath Brunei's soil, transforming this sleepy sultanate into an energy powerhouse virtually overnight. Suddenly, this small nation was sitting on what would become billions upon billions of dollars in natural resources. Born in 1946, Hassanal Bolkiah was groomed from childhood for his future role. When he ascended to the throne in 1967, at just 21 years old, following his father's abdication, Brunei was still a British protectorate, limiting his power and control over the nation's newfound wealth. But the young sultan was patient. In 1984, after years of negotiation, Brunei finally gained complete independence from the United Kingdom. Now Sultan Hassanal Bolkiah had achieved what his ancestors could only dream of: absolute control over a modern nation-state flush with oil money and no colonial oversight. What followed was a spending spree unlike anything the world had seen before. While oil-rich nations like Saudi Arabia and the UAE invested heavily in diversifying their economies, Brunei took a different approach. The Sultan treated the nation's wealth as his personal fortune, blurring the lines between state funds and royal assets. Today, oil and gas make up a staggering 99% of Brunei's exports. The entire economy revolves around these natural resources, with the royal family positioned at the center, collecting the vast majority of the profits. This concentration of wealth has created a monarchy with financial powers that medieval kings could never have imagined. The Sultan isn't just the head of state, he's simultaneously the prime minister, defense minister, finance minister, and the head of religion. There are no meaningful checks on his authority. In Brunei, his word is quite literally law. This combination of unlimited wealth and unrestricted power has enabled the Sultan to indulge his every whim on a scale that makes even multi-billionaires look modest by comparison. While official estimates place the Sultan's net worth at around $30 billion, financial experts believe this grossly underestimates his true wealth. When you control an entire nation's oil reserves, traditional accounting methods fall short. Some analysts suggest the Bolkiah family fortune could exceed $200 billion, placing them among the wealthiest dynasties in human history. But even these astronomical figures might be conservative. As we'll see, the Sultan's spending habits suggest access to funds that dwarf his reported wealth. When you can afford to spend $27 million on a single birthday party without blinking, conventional notions of money cease to apply to your lifestyle. Let's explore exactly how the Sultan spends his seemingly infinite fortune. The Sultan's extraordinary possessions. When you have unlimited wealth, ordinary luxury just doesn't cut it. For the Sultan of Brunei, even the most exclusive possessions owned by conventional billionaires represent merely the starting point. Let's begin with his residence. The Astana Nurul Iman Palace isn't just grand, it holds the Guinness World Record as the largest residential palace on Earth, spanning an incredible 2.15 million square feet. This royal dwelling contains 1,788 rooms and 257 bathrooms. To put that in perspective, this single residence has nearly as many rooms as New York's Marriott Marquess Hotel, a 50-story skyscraper. The palace features a dome made of 22-karat gold. That's 92% pure gold. 5 swimming pools, air-conditioned stables for 200 polo ponies, a mosque that accommodates 1,500 worshippers, and a banquet hall that hosts 5,000 people. When the Sultan wants to meet with visitors, he does so in rooms adorned with gold-plated furniture, under chandeliers crafted from the finest crystal. But the Astana is just one of approximately 150 residences the royal family maintains across 12 different countries. The total value of his real estate holdings alone would qualify him for billionaire status. His car collection, however, takes luxury to an entirely different level. The Sultan owns between 7,000 to 9,000 high-end vehicles with a combined value estimated at $5 billion. This isn't just the largest private car collection in the world, it's multiple times larger than any other collection. Among his automotive treasures are 600 Rolls-Royces, the largest collection of this prestigious brand ever assembled. He owns 450 Ferraris, 380 Bentleys, 170 BMWs, and 134 Koenigsegg's. Many of these aren't standard models, but custom-built vehicles created specifically for him. The highlights include gold-plated Rolls-Royces with customized umbrellas built into the roof, ultra-rare Ferrari models including 2 Ferrari 250 GTOs, each worth over $50 million, and the only Bentley Dominator SUVs ever produced. His garage space alone resembles a small city, with teams of mechanics and detailers working full-time to maintain this automotive museum that nobody outside his inner circle gets to see. When it comes to air travel, commercial flights aren't an option. The Sultan maintains a fleet of private aircraft that would make most airlines envious, with his pride and joy being a specially modified Boeing 747-400. This isn't just any private jet. It's been transformed with $120 million in customizations, including solid gold wash basins in the bathrooms, gold-plated furniture throughout the cabin, and living quarters that rival luxury hotels. The total cost of this single aircraft exceeds $400 million. For shorter trips, he can choose from among his Airbus A340, Boeing 767, or various smaller executive jets, a private air force worth well over $1 billion. The Sultan's spending habits extend beyond physical possessions. For his 50th birthday in 1996, he threw what many consider the most expensive private celebration in history, a 2-week nationwide event culminating in 3 concerts by Michael Jackson, who was paid $17 million for the performances. For the grand finale, he hosted 3,000 guests for a lavish dinner where the VIPs received solid gold medals as party favors. The total cost for these birthday festivities? $27 million, an amount that could purchase 90 Ferrari sports cars. Even his personal grooming reaches absurd levels of luxury. The Sultan reportedly spends $20,000 to fly his barber from London to Brunei for haircuts, refusing to trust local stylists with his appearance. When you can afford to spend anything, the concept of price loses all meaning. For the Sultan, the world is simply a catalog from which he can order anything in any quantity without ever checking the cost. Shocked by what you've seen so far, this is just the beginning of our journey into the Sultan's world. If you're fascinated by the hidden lives of the ultra-wealthy, hit subscribe right now and join the Billionaire Exclusives community. We expose the truth behind the world's most powerful fortunes every week. The Kingdom of Contrasts. While the Sultan lives in almost incomprehensible luxury, the reality for Brunei's citizens presents a stark contrast. The nation operates under a complex system where extreme wealth exists alongside strict control. On one hand, the Sultan portrays himself as a benevolent ruler. Brunei citizens enjoy significant benefits rarely seen elsewhere: no income tax, free health care, free education through university level, subsidized housing, and low-interest loans for purchasing homes and cars. Unemployment is low, and poverty, as defined in Western nations, barely exists. These generous social programs serve a calculated purpose. By providing for basic needs and offering modest comfort, the Sultan effectively purchases public compliance. The system creates a population dependent on royal generosity, unwilling to risk these benefits by challenging authority. The real cost comes in the form of personal freedoms. In 2019, Brunei implemented full Sharia law, introducing harsh penalties for behaviors that most Western nations consider personal choices. Under these laws, adultery and same-sex relationships can be punished by death through stoning. Theft can result in amputation. Even minor infractions like skipping Friday prayers or having children outside marriage can lead to flogging or lengthy prison sentences. This legal framework stands in stunning contradiction to the Sultan's own reported lifestyle. While citizens face death for sexual behaviors deemed inappropriate, allegations about the royal family's private conduct suggest rules that apply to commoners don't extend to those in power. The Sultan maintains tight control over all aspects of Brunei society. Media censorship is extensive, with journalism strictly regulated and criticism of the royal family criminalized. Only about 60% of Brunei's population has internet access, and those connections are heavily monitored. Social media usage is limited, and dissenting voices are quickly silenced. Education centers around Malay Islamic monarchy ideology, which teaches absolute deference to royal authority as a religious and cultural obligation. Alternative political parties exist in name only, with no real opportunity to challenge the monarchy's complete control. Public adoration of the Sultan is mandatory, with his portrait displayed prominently throughout the country. Government buildings, schools, businesses, and most homes feature his image. Annual celebrations of his birthday are national events with required participation. The effectiveness of this system becomes apparent when comparing Brunei to other oil-rich nations. While countries like Saudi Arabia have faced varying degrees of dissent and calls for reform, Brunei has experienced remarkably little visible resistance to royal rule. The combination of material comfort and comprehensive control has created a population largely accepting of the status quo. Foreign governments largely ignore human rights concerns in Brunei, prioritizing access to oil reserves and strategic military partnerships. The Sultan has cultivated close relationships with Western leaders, hosting elaborate state visits and making generous donations to influential institutions. When international criticism does emerge, as happened in 2019 when celebrities like George Clooney and Elton John called for boycotts of Brunei-owned luxury hotels following the implementation of Sharia law, the Sultan often makes temporary concessions before quietly returning to business as usual once attention fades. This careful balancing act between provision and control explains how a single family maintains absolute authority over a nation in the modern era. The Sultan doesn't just own Brunei's wealth, he effectively owns Brunei itself, with a population whose comfort depends entirely on his continued generosity. The question becomes not just how much money one man controls, but how he leverages that wealth to maintain power that medieval kings would have envied. Scandals and controversies. The public image of Sultan Hassanal Bolkiah as a devout Muslim leader contrasts sharply with allegations about the royal family's private conduct. These contradictions became international news in 2019 when the Sultan introduced Sharia law, prompting worldwide scrutiny of Brunei's ruling dynasty. The most vocal critics weren't political opponents. They were Hollywood celebrities and business leaders. George Clooney wrote a scathing article calling for boycotts of the Sultan's hotel properties, including the Beverly Hills Hotel and Hotel Bel Air in Los Angeles. Every time you stay at or attend an event at one of these hotels, you are putting money directly into the pockets of men who choose to stone and whip to death their own citizens, Clooney stated. Elton John, Ellen DeGeneres, and Richard Branson joined the boycott. Branson announced that no Virgin employees would stay at any hotels owned by the Sultan, while major organizations canceled events at these properties, resulting in millions in lost revenue. Perhaps the most troubling accusations came from former visitors to the royal palace. In 1997, former Miss USA Shannon Markadick filed a lawsuit against the Sultan and his brother, Prince Jeffrey, alleging she was lured to Brunei under false pretenses of modeling work, only to discover she was expected to participate in paid private parties with the royals. Her lawsuit claimed she was held against her will for over a month. While the case was ultimately dismissed due to the Sultan's sovereign immunity as a head of state, it brought unprecedented attention to allegations about the royal family's private entertainment practices. These accusations gained further credibility in 2010 when Lauren Jenner published a book detailing her experiences at Prince Jeffrey's parties from 1992 to 1995. She described a world where young women were regularly flown to Brunei for lavish private gatherings, with some allegedly as young as 15. According to her account, there's no such thing as underage over there. The book portrayed a disturbing environment where women were essentially imprisoned in luxurious surroundings. There were no books, no magazines, no television. I considered peeing in a wastebasket. I was trembling from the cold, from hunger, from nerves. Prince Jeffrey's personal spending habits proved so excessive that even the Sultan eventually took action. By 2000, Jeffrey had reportedly spent $14.8 billion of government money, living at a rate of $747,000 per day for a decade. His personal assets included a yacht named Tits, with tenders called Nipple 1 and Nipple 2, 17 aircraft, and thousands of cars. The Sultan ultimately forced Jeffrey to auction his possessions, but the brothers reportedly reconciled years later, with Jeffrey returning to Brunei. These scandals highlight the fundamental contradiction at the heart of Brunei's monarchy, a ruling family that imposes ultra-conservative religious laws on citizens while allegedly flouting those same principles in private. The Sultan's ability to avoid serious consequences for these contradictions stems from his strategic deployment of wealth. By controlling virtually all media within Brunei, he ensures local citizens hear little about international criticism. By maintaining close relationships with Western leaders through defense agreements and oil contracts, he secures political protection from major powers. When faced with international backlash, the Sultan often makes temporary concessions, like announcing moratoriums on certain punishments, without actually changing the fundamental legal structure. For ordinary Bruneians, speaking out about royal behavior carries enormous risk. Criticizing the monarch can result in years of imprisonment under the country's sedition laws. With no independent judiciary and total royal control over law enforcement, there's no realistic avenue for holding the powerful accountable. This combination of wealth, power, and strategic relationships creates a shield that has thus far protected the Sultan from meaningful consequences for the contradictions between his public policies and alleged private conduct. The hidden wealth. While official estimates place the Sultan's net worth at $30 billion, financial experts consider this figure laughably conservative. The true extent of his wealth remains deliberately obscured through complex financial structures designed to hide assets from public scrutiny. Unlike most billionaires who build their fortunes through companies with public financial reporting, the Sultan controls an entire nation's resources with minimal transparency. There's no clear division between personal royal wealth and state assets, a convenient arrangement that makes tracking his true net worth nearly impossible. Financial analysts point to a complex web of shell companies and trusts scattered across tax havens globally. The strategy follows a predictable pattern. Assets move from Brunei to offshore entities, then through multiple jurisdictions, creating paper trails so convoluted that determining actual ownership becomes virtually impossible. This isn't merely speculation. In 2013, leaked documents revealed over 500 offshore companies connected to the Brunei royal family. These entities held everything from luxury hotels to investment portfolios worth billions. And that's just what investigators managed to uncover, likely representing only a fraction of the total financial network. When pressing British officials about the Sultan's wealth during a parliamentary inquiry, one frustrated MP remarked, "It's like trying to nail jelly to a wall. The money moves constantly, the ownership changes frequently, and records mysteriously disappear." Consider this perspective. If the Sultan can spend $27 million on a birthday party, maintain 9,000 luxury cars worth $5 billion, and own hundreds of properties worldwide without making a dent in his lifestyle, does a $30 billion net worth make any mathematical sense? Some financial experts suggest the true family fortune could exceed $200 billion, which would make them wealthier than Elon Musk. Others go further, suggesting the combination of oil reserves, real estate, investments, and physical assets could push their total wealth past the trillion-dollar mark, a level of wealth previously thought impossible for a single family. As Brunei's oil reserves gradually diminish over the coming decades, questions arise about the nation's future. Unlike neighboring countries that have diversified their economies, Brunei remains almost entirely dependent on fossil fuels. This leaves the country vulnerable to price fluctuations and the inevitable transition to renewable energy. The Sultan has made modest attempts at economic diversification, investing in tourism and financial services, but these sectors remain underdeveloped. Critics suggest this limited progress stems from a fundamental reluctance to create economic power centers outside royal control. For the Sultan's subjects, the future likely holds increasing uncertainty. As oil revenues decline, the generous welfare system that ensures public compliance may become unsustainable. Without these benefits, the social contract that has maintained stability could unravel. The Sultan himself, however, appears insulated from these concerns. With vast wealth secured in global investments, the royal family could maintain their extravagant lifestyle indefinitely, even if Brunei's economy collapses. This reality represents perhaps the most troubling aspect of the Sultan's reign, the fundamental disconnect between ruler and ruled. While presenting himself as the nation's protector and provider, he has effectively treated an entire country as his personal property, extracting its wealth, controlling its people, and preparing escape routes should the system ever fail. The Sultan of Brunei doesn't just have wealth beyond imagination, he wields a level of power that belongs more to historical dynasties than modern governance. In creating this system, he has shown that with enough money and strategic relationships, the rules that constrain ordinary people, and even ordinary billionaires, simply don't apply. In Brunei, we see not just extraordinary wealth, but a sobering demonstration of how money, in sufficient quantities, transcends all conventional limitations, moral, legal, and political.